Hi, I'm Charlie Frost, and on this week's episode of the 24MX Workshop, I'll be demonstrating how to remove your rear wheel bearings and when it's convenient to change them. Stay tuned to find out more. Knowing when to change your rear wheel bearings is very important, as because sometimes you will find that your rear wheel sometimes may have movement in between the swing arm, which indicates there's play in the wheel bearings. So I'm now going to demonstrate how to remove the rear wheel bearings in the rear wheel. So first things first, you'll see here we've got the spacer. Simply pop that off with your fingers, nice and easy. Likewise on the other side. Here, pull that one off. Simple as that. So now, as you can see here, we've got the outer seal. So we're going to remove that seal. By doing that, we'll need a flathead screwdriver. Going to slot it just under the seal, like so. And then just lean down, like so. Nice and easily. Just going to prise it out, like so. And as you can see, you've got a build up of all the grime and dirt down in the hub. So just going to get a bit of old rag, give it a clean out, just to make life easier for us when trying to remove the bearings, like that. Same again on the other side. We're going to prise the seal out, like that. As you can see here, obviously got a bit of build up of all the grime and dirt from where the bike has been ridden, so try and avoid that in the next seal we're going to put in. So I'll show you a little tip when I put grease inside the seals to prevent all the dirt. Same again this side, I'm just going to wipe out all the excess oil and dirt. Now you will see the difference between the two sides. If I flip this back over and show you, you can see on this side we've just got the bearing here, whereas the other side you can see we've got a little circlip just in the perimeter of the hub. That stops the bearing from coming out. So what we're going to do first is we're going to get our circlip pliers and we're going to prise open this circlip so we can then pull the bearing out. Sometimes it can be quite tricky to get the circlip out, so I'm going to use a small flathead screwdriver. So when I squeeze the circlip together, I could hook the screwdriver under the circlip and just prise it up. Saves any drama. So we're going to squeeze the circlip pliers together, closing the circlip. Just get your flathead screwdriver, pop it underneath. Now making sure that you don't ping the circlip out and it goes flying. So just keeping it nice and firm, like that. So now you can see the circlip is lifted. So I'm going to grab the bigger screwdriver, cover the circlip and just prise it up out, like that. So now that we've removed the circlip from the hub, we're now going to pull the bearings out. The most important part is we don't damage the hub. So to remove the bearings, we're going to be using this puller set, bearing puller set, which can be found on the 24MX website. Now it's pretty straightforward. One slide hammer and all the bearing dies. Different size bearing dies corresponding to different size bearings. So with the bearings we're going to be using from Prox, we're going to be using the 25mm die, because with the bearings you'll see the inner of the bearing will slide through the die like so. Now different size bearings also correspond to different size dies. So we're using the 25mm die with the slide hammer, like so. So firstly, as you can see on the die, it's separated into 4 quarters. What that does is, as you tighten the die up, the ends will open up, which will then hold the bearing. So when the die is in place and we have the slide hammer knocking the bearing out, this little rigid edge will hold the bearing the other side so it won't slide back through. So what we're going to do, the first step, is we're going to slacken off the die so we've got a lot of movement on this end. And on a slight angle, we're going to slide the die into the bearing, like so. And we're going to push it down until you feel it click, like that. So what's happened now is the other end of the die has opened up. Now it's grabbed the bearing on the other side. So quite simply, we're going to tighten that one up, like so. Now that's locked in place. On this end of the slide hammer, we've also got a thread. That's going to tighten up into that end of the die, making sure that it's done all the way up so it's nice and firm, like that. And then very simply, the way the slide hammer works is the stop here acts as the hammer part. So as you knock it, it's going to pull the bearing up out of the wheel. So without further ado, now that that's all secured in there like so, you're going to simply and there you have it, one bearing out, nice and easy. Now there is an old school method. You can use a hammer and a piece of bar or whatever you want, but this is nice and simple and it creates less damage because sometimes people end up chipping the hub on this end. So as you can see, the bearing is now off, nice and easy. We're just going to remove the inner tube like so. So now that we've removed the bearing, to remove the bearing off the die, we're going to simply take the slide hammer back off of the bearing die, like so. And then we're just going to slacken off that part, which then allows us to close this part, which then we can slide the bearing back off of this end. Now, it can be quite fiddly and quite firm. Sometimes you can get the end of a screwdriver or an Allen key or something and just give it a tap to get it back through. Like that. And then slide that one back off of there. So now one old bearing has been removed with no damage to the bearing die. It's going to flip the wheel over and do the same the other side. So same again, bearing die, slide it in on the angle. Wait until it clicks in place, like that. And then we're going to tighten the die back up. So it's finger tight, so it's nice and firm and secure in the bearing. Same again with the slide hammer. We're going to tighten that one back in to the bearing die. And then same again, simply pull up with the slide hammer. And as you can see, that one went a lot easier. There's no damage to the hub and very plain and simple. So we're going to take that bearing back off of the bearing die, like so, and then slacken off the bearing die, giving us more movement on this end. And then same again, just going to get the end of a screwdriver with a metal tip to it, just give it a slight knock, and then simply prise it off with our hands. And there is the second bearing removed from the hub. So that's now both bearings removed. So it's going to give the hub a clean up inside, and we're going to reinstate the new bearings. So using our A9 racing oils all in one spray, just going to use a degreaser and clean up any of the old excess dirt and grease inside the hub. Also makes it a lot easier for new bearings to slide in without catching on any dirt or any sharp edges. So likewise with the other side. So now the hub is ready to insert the new bearings. Now we're going to use the Prox bearing set. In this set, you do get obviously the 2 new bearings and also 2 new rubber seals. So that means that we can do away with the old metal seals. As you can see, both old bearings, but we're going to reuse the circlip and obviously the wheel spacers. So we'll give them a clean up before we insert the new ones. So we've got the 2 rubber seals and the 2 bearings. Now before inserting the bearings, I tend to give them a bit of a grease up because it makes it a lot easier for them to slide into the hub. So we're going to use some lithium grease and just give them a nice coating around the edges. So when the bearing slides into the hub, it's a lot easier, almost like lubrication, but also prevents it getting caught on the way in. So we're going to simply give it a nice coating around the edge like that. Same on the other bearing, just to make life a bit easier when inserting the new ones. And also a little tip that I do when I'm putting in the new seals. As you can see, we've got sort of a ridge on the inside with a gap to it. Now I do fill that with grease just so it stops any dirt getting stuck inside of there. We're just going to coat the inside of the seal with some grease. You want to try and pack it quite thick so it stops all the dirt getting inside, like so. And then do the same on the other one. I'm just going to wipe off any excess on the outside that we don't need. So now we've got the hub ready for the new bearings. Now as you can see, on this side of the hub, we've got a little lip just down in here. That's where the circlip will sit. So I tend to do this side first. So when putting the bearing in place and the circlip, when you come to flip the wheel over to put the other bearing in, you don't push this bearing through any further. So if we do this bearing first, so it sits down on the lip further down, which is further down the bottom, we know that bearing has gone in as far as it needs to. And then by putting the circlip on top, that stops the bearing being pushed any further up when knocking the bearing through from the other side. So we're going to do this bearing first. So simply going to sit it on top like so it's nice and flush. There's 2 different methods you can do it. Some people reuse the old bearing and they'll simply sit it on top, and then with their hammer they'll simply knock it down so it's flush, and then remove the old bearing, and then get a socket piece on the inside of it and knock it down in until it hits the lip. So that's the way I'm going to do it. You can also use a bigger size socket head and sit it on the outside perimeter of the bearing and knock it down into the hub, but sometimes you can get your socket piece stuck in the hub. So I'm going to show you the way I do it. So using the old bearing, simply sit it on top so it's flush, and I'm going to go around the bearing like that. Making sure that when we knock it, we're always going top, bottom, left and right, so it goes in a nice symmetrical way. Because if you were to do too many hits on one side, you'll go in on an angle. So making sure the bearing stays nice and flush when we're knocking it in. Now, as you can see now, it's pretty much flush with the hub. Now, if I was to carry on going with the bearing, knocking it in, I get the other bearing stuck. So we're going to do away with the bearing. We're now going to grab a socket head that's big enough to sit on the inside of the bearing, so we can knock it down in without damaging the rubber part of the bearing, which holds the ball bearings. I've seen quite a few people damage the rubber part of the bearing and the ball bearings fall out, and then you damage the bearing. So we're going to use a 24mm socket head, which, as you can see, sits nice and flush on the inner of the bearing. The same again, keeping it nice and straight. We're going to knock the new bearing in until it hits the lip in the hub. So now that is now nice and flush with the lip down in the hub. We've not done any damage to the bearing itself, and then we can now put the circlip into place. Using our degreaser oil, just going to get rid of any of the old dirt and oil on the circlip. Then we're going to grab our circlip pliers. We're going to put them into place. And always be careful that when you do put tension on the circlip, it doesn't catch you in the eye or ping off. So simply going to sit it in place, squeeze the pliers together, pushing down on the circlip. As you can see, one end has gone in, but the other side hasn't. So you're going to get a flathead screwdriver and simply give it a knock down. And that is now clipped into place. So that bearing is now nice and secure inside the hub, making sure this end is in firm. So now this end of the hub is nice and secure. We're going to grab our new rubber seal, which we've obviously put some grease inside, and simply push it down in place so it's nice and flush with the hub. As you can see now, that is sat nice and flush with the hub. So that is the disc side done. Same again, we're going to flip the wheel over and do the same process the other side. So not forgetting, without putting the tube inside, I have seen people replace bearings and then find this piece on the floor and forget that they've not inserted it into the wheel. So we're going to give this a quick clean up. Same again with the degreaser. It's pretty clean, to be fair. It's not too dirty, but just make sure it's nice and clean. Also on the inside, so when the spindle passes through, it's nice and freely moving. And then we're going to drop that down into the hub, nice and flush like so. And then make sure that's lined up nice and straight with the other bearing, like that. And then same process again. We're going to grab the new bearing for this side, drop it down in place. Then using my old bearing, same again, just give it a little tap in, make sure it's in. So we're going to sit the old bearing on top, and we're going to give it a few knocks. Same again, that's now nice and flush. Going to do away with the bearing. So we're going to grab our 24mm socket head, which we're going to sit on the inside of the bearing, making sure that we don't do any damage to the rubber part. And we're going to knock that down in nice and flush. So now, if you look down inside, you can see that the tube is nice and flush with bearings both end, which means when the spindle will go into the hub, it won't catch on bearings either end. So this hub doesn't require the circlip because you've already inserted it in the other end. So we're simply going to insert the new rubber seal on this side of the hub. Same again, push it down so it sits nice and flush with the hub. So now we've got both bearings replaced, both seals. Not going to forget the last and most important part, putting the spacers back in. So we're going to give them a quick clean off. Same again, using the degreaser. Just removing all of that old grease and dirt. I like to grease them up just so they go in nice and easier. Just a small coating either end. So slide that one down in there, like so. Making sure that we've obviously got movement, that it's not catching anything. Then likewise with the other side, give it a little clean off. As you can see, you've got a lot of grease and a lot of old manky oil and dirt in there. And then same again, a light coating of the grease just to insert it into the seal, like so, making sure that we've got movement like that. And there you have both bearings, both seals and spacers reinserted like so. Now, that's a very easy way of doing it. There are different ways and methods. People have their own ways of doing it. This is the way I personally do it. because I find it's less time consuming and obviously less damage done to the hub. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget, obviously, when you do purchase this bearing set from 24MX, you can also share it with your friends. It's a very good piece of kit. Obviously, like I said, it saves a lot of damage. It makes life a lot easier when using a slide hammer. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, and don't forget to share, and I'll see you on the next episode.